Alright, Internet, I'm going to try to do some more recordings, and so I'm going to start with one of my favorites. This is Salvia clevelandii Arroyo Azul, and I'm just going to briefly explain what an arroyo is. Apparently, it is a seasonal creek bed which runs with water during the wet season, if you get one. And, well, there's some disagreement on the exact definition because this does appear to be an original Spanish word which doesn't quite have an accurate translation, maybe, because it seems to refer to a bunch of different things which are related but not quite right. The first time it was described to me was that an arroyo is sort of a seasonal gulch, sort of a tiny river valley, which not entirely uncommon in chaparral areas where you have seasonal rivers that are only active for like 3-4 months at a time, and what you end up with is a very, very, very slowly carved little river gorge. And sometimes these areas get subterranean water from the river bed, but oftentimes this is not a really great, reliable source of water for a large, what would otherwise be riparian area. However, these narrow gorges can become host to plants that would otherwise not do very well, and this is kind of not really an example of this because Cleveland sage is well known for being dry, hot, loving species. But Arroyo Azul is probably the most garden-friendly variety of Cleveland sage I've ever seen. This grows in morning sun, but I've seen it growing in complete shade. It's not very happy there, but it's the only kind that I know to survive in that kind of environment. It also tolerates regular watering and is one of the stronger aromatic varieties that I know of. In addition, it blooms throughout the summer, or at least spring to summer, late spring. I believe this started blooming at the beginning of June, maybe to the end of July, which is remarkably long blooming time for a dry-growing California salvia. Most will bloom for like a month, maybe, especially if it's not very wet. And this particular example doesn't really get water anymore, partially due to sprinkler maintenance and proximity to sprinklers, and it just doesn't need it, really. This is not a variety that you can just pop into the ground and water and it'll be fine. I had to establish this over autumn and winter and spring, and fortunately it survived its first summer, which was really hot and dry, and it did okay. And then the second season it did really well. Third season it grew about, I don't know, half a foot in diameter. This is also one of the most compact of the Salvia clevelandii that I've seen. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is the leaf shape. And this is something that has fascinated me with this species in particular, because I'm going to show you a close relative, which is Salvia leucophylla. It's growing right next to it. This was planted before I really got into the herbalism thing, but I believe it's either just a wild selection from the... Oh, let me think. Nope. It's either a wild selection from around the Theodore Payne Foundation in Sun Valley, California, or it could be Figueroa, which comes from near the Santa Barbara area. Grows in full... It comes from an area that grows in full sun and has very little water or really any humidity to speak of. And I hope you can see that the leaf shape, it bears a very distant resemblance. In this case, because the Cleveland sage is growing in so much shade, it actually has quite a bit of green pigmentation. You don't really see that with the leucophila, which is California purple sage. Even in shade, it will retain its dense coating of very short white hairs, which give it a very soft, velvety sort of texture and a very pale appearance. Their range does overlap in Southern California, near the San Diego County, where both varieties do live, plus pollen can travel great distances, and probably do this cross-pollination. A lot of the common varieties, no-name varieties, some of the cultivars, which are not officially considered to be hybrids, have a similar appearance to that of the purple sage. Now, I may be a little close-minded on this, but I feel that the shape and texture of the leaf will tell you how pure the genetics are on the plant. This particular one can be traced back to a collection from Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden in the 1980s, when they went to Baja California, northern Baja California. It might be from a location called Arroyo Azul, but I think it was Arroyo something else. And they brought this back, and for some reason it never really took off in the trade. I'm not sure why, but the Theodore Payne Foundation in Sun Valley took up this plant, and they perennially offer it just over the year. And when it's available in the spring or winter, I snap it up because I love it. I think it's one of the best. And especially since I've been collecting plants for over 5 years, I'm kind of running out of room to put plants. So smaller plants are more welcome in my garden than larger ones at this point. Let's see, what was I talking about? Oh yes. So this is an uncommon variety in the trade, but definitely worth picking up if you can find it. Other varieties of Salvia clevelandii, which I recommend, include Winifred Gilman, which, if you can get it really reliably, and that is not propagated from seed, but from cutting, so that it is a genetic clone. That one's a fairly reliable, if you're really in the right area for Winifred Gilman to thrive, which is pretty much Southern California, Arizona, Colorado, where it's really hot and dry. Not the Colorado that's really green, and not the Arizona or California that's really green. It's not going to do well there. But if you give it really dry soil that's well draining, and you establish it only during the wet season and don't water it during the rest of the year, you can be rewarded by half-inch, bright, intense electric blue flowers. Rather dissimilar to this one, but the leaf shape is definitely the same, and it has a more airy look rather than dense like this. Now, as for the flowers, I'd like to zoom in and show those too if I can. Let's see, I'm a little out of practice. That looks good. And nope. And yes. Focus. Come on. Hello? No? Yes. That looks focused. This actually, if you notice the shape of the flower whorls, again, I'll show the leucophila for comparison. Get that into focus, maybe. Yeah, here we go. No, that's dumb. But you see how orderly it is. Very symmetrical. I encountered that with clevelandii too, but with Arroyo Azul it has a flowering habit that is more similar to another species, which I can get. Let's see. This is Salvia mellifera, or California black sage. It is the most populous of the California sages. It grows pretty much as far north as Northern California. I believe on the distribution, I think I saw it even there's a large forest above Yosemite Valley, and right this moment I cannot remember what it's called. Embarrassing. I will rectify that when I do a video on mellifera. But you could kind of see it has an asymmetrical sort of look to it, and that is because even after the flower clusters are finished growing, or finished maturing and start blooming, they will continue to grow new flower buds, which is one of the reasons that black sage is the longest blooming of the California sages, next to hummingbird sage, Salvia spathacea. On Cleveland sage, it certainly does extend the bloom time, at least for this variety of Cleveland sage, which offers nectar for larger bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. Although, to be honest, I only ever see bees on this in the spring. I'm wondering if maybe there's more nectar for them to reach with their proboscis, or perhaps they move on to different varieties. With native bees and naturalized bees, they will tend to hop from one genus of plant to another as the season progresses, so that they have a reliable source of nectar throughout the year. Because as bees, that's just really important to them. Could also have to do with pollen content. I've never been big on observing pollen, and I know that is another essential food for many species of bee. But this is one of my favorites for the yard. I know I keep losing track. I should really write these out, but I did not.